welcome to Jenipher Wellness. I'm here with Ashley and I'm so excited. Ashley is the founder owner of Awakening Spaces and she's here to talk about home health with me today. Welcome, Ashley.
Hi, Jennifer. Thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, it's such an honor to have you. I can't wait to dive into this stuff.
You know.
So, how did Awakening Spaces start?
So I started Awakening Spaces after being in the interior design industry for the last 13 years. Um, I I graduated college, I began to work in the field, started going on to sites. But after college, my health really began to tank. And I couldn't really figure out what it was. I started experimenting with different diets, and I even decided to start studying at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition because I wanted to just go deeper and kind of learn about all of the things that represent health. And so at that time, I started, ditching toxic products and slowly making these shifts in my life. I mean, I was using a lot of toxic things at that time and during college, growing up, huge fan of Bath and Body Works, all of the things. I just started to investigate what was creating health issues for me and why I was experiencing a lot of really crazy symptoms, fatigue being at the top and forefront. But really, my symptoms were very neurological, anxiety, depression, memory loss, very bad memory loss. And so it was really scary, and I just continued to dig. And it wasn't until about 5 years ago where I started working with a functional who did a lot of testing with me, and we realized that I had a really high level of mycotoxins in my system. And that was sort of what opened up the world of mold to me, and parasites and electromagnetic radiation. And she, pretty much just said, okay, well, we're going to work on, killing these parasites, getting your gut in health, and then, trying to detox the mold. But she's like, but, you also have to figure out where the mold is coming from. And I'm like, it's like a can of worms when you start to peel back the layers of all this stuff, and it can be really, really confusing. So, I was already doing interior design. I felt like I was pretty well versed in environments. And so I was kind of confused. It felt like everything came crashing down on me because it wasn't something that we were really talking about in school, in any of the architecture firms I was working in. That was never a priority. It was really just the push for green and sustainable. And so that was happening to me, and I was starting to feel better and better and better just through, improving my health. I ended up having, a remediation company come in. There was mold underneath my sink. And then simultaneously, my best friend had a really, really bad mold exposure. One that really, I'd say, like, swept her life from under her. She has the genetic predisposition, the HLA-DR gene. And so it was really crazy to see, how it can impact us both in different ways. And so that really led me to trying to figure out why. Like, why is there mold everywhere? Why do we have water damaged buildings? Like, why is no one why does no one understand how sick it can make people? And that's where I really just started, following the pieces, the cookie crumbs, to try to get answers and to learn. And I found building biology, which really uses, it's the study of our environment, and they use nature as the gold standard, and really have a very strong emphasis on mold, chemicals, and electromagnetic radiation. And so from there, I, got into the EMF portion of things, and I wasn't going to go the full way with it, and then decided to continue the full certification for the EMRS, just because I was fascinated by it. And I had found that by making changes to my electroclimate, I was also feeling better. So that all led to starting Awakening Spaces and just deciding that I wasn't ever going to be happy working at a regular architecture firm anymore, because I couldn't ever get these points across to anyone. And I really just wanted to share this information. So that is
Oh,
how Awakening Spaces was born.
that's wonderful. And I can imagine because we end up with all of this knowledge and then you kind of feel like you're in a box, right? Like you can't go outside of that box because there's policies and things we have to stay within. And it's so many layers, like you said.
Yeah.
Oh, I tell you, what an experience.
Yeah. And I was working my job right before I started Awakening Spaces. I was working in healthcare. And I mean, I'm helping to put plastic all over the floors and wallpaper on all the walls. And after I started learning this stuff, I was like, oh my gosh, we're doing everything wrong. Like it just felt like everything was backwards and my world just came crumbling down on me. So, and exactly right. There's so many policies in place, especially when you're working like bigger corporations and whatnot, that you can't always do what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. So that brings us to what exactly do you do then?
Yeah, so I do a mix of things right now. I'd say 20% of my work is interior design. So I'm actually working with homeowners who are going through remediation and looking to do a renovation, and we're selecting materials, or I'm putting together floor plans for them and drawings and elevations so that the contractor can build off of those, as well as specifications for actual finishes and products and materials. And then the other portion of my business is really just consulting with people. So, it's usually diving into whatever project they're doing, working with their architectural team, their interior design team, their contractor to help guide the project towards health. So that's really dabbling in a lot more than just the interiors, but sort of bigger strategies for preventing mold in buildings and finding the right site, and looking at everything from, drainage to electromagnetic radiation that might be existing there, to how to prevent and avoid chemicals in the space as well.
Absolutely. There's so many areas to tackle. So that's amazing that you're able to provide that for people, because people they don't know, right? And it takes like an unfortunate circumstance for us to kind of go down that rabbit hole, so to speak. For sure.
Yeah.
So what do you find, like, where do you find clients struggle the most? Because I do find that a lot of people don't really realize the effect of EMF until they kind of go into the journey of an environmental illness, whether it be mold or Lyme. It just kind of just trickles in. So where do you find people struggle the most when it comes to, like, if they come to see you and going through all that information, what do you find is the hardest to believe?
Yeah. Oh, well, you hit the nail on the head with that one. The EMF portion, I don't think you really realize how much, and this is true for me specifically, but you don't realize how much it impacts you until you remove it. And you think, wow, I actually have been feeling better. And then when you bring it back in, it's like when you do an elimination diet, you start removing foods and you start introducing things back in, you're like, oh, okay, now I can tell that was like something that bothered me. I think EMF, because you can't see it, you can sometimes hear it, but not really. And you can't, it's invisible. So it's really, that one's really tough for people. And usually I'd say not the most important one. And it's harder to grasp because, people want to have low EMF, but sometimes you can get caught in thinking that, like, crystals and things or gizmos and gadgets are going to be the thing to protect you 100%. And that's just not the case. Or, I'll see people wearing Bluetooth headphones and wearing like a EMF shielding pendant. And it's sort of like a double-edged sword. So I think that one's really challenging. I think people wanted to understand it, but it's very complex. I mean, there's still things about it that I'm learning, and it's something that I think takes years and years and years and years to become an expert at. And I'm nowhere near close to being that. So that's for sure, I'd say number one. And then I think the other big one is that because people think, I think people struggle with thinking that because a building material is non-nutritive to mold, meaning it technically can't feed the mold itself, that it is going to protect you from mold. But the truth is that really we need to manage. No material is really safe from mold because no material is really safe from dust. And if we have, water vapor or a humid climate or, an internally generated plumbing leak or some source of water, then that mold can feed on the dust. That is going to be really, really hard to control. So I think, when sometimes people will come and they're saying, I'm building this house out of metal and concrete and steel and all these things. And, there's issues with those as well because they can't necessarily breathe and they're harder to dry out and they can trap moisture and whatnot. So I think that's probably the second really big misconception.
And that's so true because I hear that all the time. People say that they're just going to have, a metal house with concrete. And like you said, every material really is at risk to be molded and to get moldy in the right environment, right?
Yeah. And the thing with metal too is it can still be damaged from water. If moisture gets trapped, it can corrode. And, with wood, even though that's technically a nutritive material, it has this amazing ability to take on moisture when the humidity is high and release it back out into the environment when the humidity is low. So there is some benefits in using materials that are nutritive and have a high hygric buffering capacity, we call it.
Very interesting. And that's good to know, right? Because the majority of our houses, and I've seen you talk about this, and I live in a new build area. It's funny because the majority of the houses they're built from wood. But the unfortunate thing is a lot of times these materials are left out in all the elements where they're not properly taken care of. And then, you build a house with it. So a lot of times we're getting materials in that already have mold on them, which is really unfortunate.
Exactly. And if you're using healthy materials and you don't have the right strategies in place, there's so many moving pieces to it, then any material can be compromised. So it's really not, it's thinking about not just the materials you're using, but what are the larger strategies that we're going to do to, redirect the water away from the home and keep this home dry.
Yeah. And I bet those are really common mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even with vegetation close to the house, I've heard that can be a huge concern. Like it's not even just the grade, but it's like how close do you have vegetation to your house? Like there's just so many elements. So you must be a treasure to your clients because you wouldn't, the normal person doesn't think about those things, right? Like the average person, I should say, but it really takes you to get sick and start digging, unfortunately.
I know it really does. And there's just so many things. And when you're building a house, there's so many things to be thinking about. So, I do feel like it's a value to have a consultant who's just focusing on those aspects and can work with your architect, with your designer to make sure, not only are we making this look beautiful and feel great, but like we're not missing out on these details that could really be, catastrophic down the road.
Yeah, and because it is your job, you're so involved. So like really good sources and really good products that you can use. Like it would be so much easier because building a house in itself is super stressful. So having somebody to guide them through that is definitely beneficial for sure. Now, what would you say are like the top, when you were mentioning like water leaks and stuff, where are the areas that you feel people need to focus on once they're in their home and they're being preventative? Where are the most common areas that you find mold creeping up?
Yeah, so internally generated sources are going to be any wet location. So most, important is your bathroom because you're taking showers in there all the time. You're creating a really high humidity in there. Your kitchen, under all of your sinks, your washing machine. You want to make sure you're having strategies for that. Your hot water tank. I think it's really one of the best things anyone can do is really get some sort of automatic water shutoff that's tied to sort of their security system that essentially if there's a leak, it will automatically shut the water off for them. Because failures are bound to happen. So it's really about how can we be preventative? How can we be one step ahead of those failures? And when they do happen, we're prepared for them. So there's lots of like gizmos and gadgets and things that you can buy. But I think really trying to maintain a good relative humidity within the home, practicing, measuring the RH in the home and making sure it's between 35 and 30 and 45% is going to be huge. I have a couple of them in my house. So I have one in each bathroom so that I can just make sure I'm monitoring it and I'm running the exhaust fan whenever the RH is really high. And so I can make sure I'm leaving that on until it gets down to a safe level. But yeah, any wet area of the home, anywhere water is being brought into the home is a weak point. And so should definitely be monitored regularly.
Yeah, definitely. And the RH, just so people know, it's relative humidity, right? In the home. And you can get those testers. Like I know my husband, he picked up a 3-pack at our local home hardware store. And I think it was $30 for 3 of them. And we keep them on every floor of the house because people don't realize how important it is to keep an eye on your moisture. So I have a question for you. What are your thoughts on humidifiers that are installed to HVAC units?
Yeah, I probably would avoid anything in my actual HVAC unit. However, I am not, I do approve of humidifiers. I think there are certain humidifiers that can be really great. Like I'm in Denver, Colorado, and it can get down to 18% relative humidity, which is way too dry. I can tell it, I can feel it in my skin. It's uncomfortable. Whenever I'm sick, I feel like I'm sick longer. And also viruses can, they like really, really dry climate or really, really dry temperatures or humidity. Sorry. So I think, making sure that you're able to just keep it in the range of like 30 to 45 is going to be really good, but I probably wouldn't do it inside of the ductwork. You just don't know. You don't have as much control over maintaining and cleaning and seeing what's happening in there. So I say using it as a point source is probably a smarter and safer way to go about it.
Yeah, and that's a really good suggestion. And the reason why I ask is because I'm in Ontario, so I'm in somewhat of a similar climate to you, where we can have it drop to, I think the lowest I've seen it here is 23, which is really dry, right? Yeah. And then if you don't have control on your moisture and humidity going up, it can get into the 60s. So, but a lot of people do have humidifiers directly on the HVAC unit here. So, and it's always one of those things where it's like, I don't think it's the greatest idea because it's just like you said, it's another thing for you to monitor and maintain, right?
Exactly. And you really just want to make sure that if you do have a humidifier on your unit that you are maintaining it, you're really keeping up with that.
And people, I think that's, the wonderful thing about what you're doing is you do have presence on social media as well. So you are always putting those tidbits out because there are these little things, like you said, always checking underneath your sinks, making sure that they're clear. So it's readily accessible. You don't have to dig to see if there's any type of dampness happening underneath there.
Yeah. Keeping things clear and clean. And, I think another area too is like closets. I think you had mentioned that to me, like rooms, any room really that doesn't get a lot of circulation, making sure you're monitoring those areas as well, especially if they're on an exterior wall, a perimeter wall that could potentially be getting condensation. Didn't you mention
that's what happened? Well, looking back now, like my mold journey was definitely, I was hit really, really hard at the workplace, but I also had a childhood of mold. And then when I got hit at the workplace and ended up going on a medical leave because I was, in the system and not getting answers, it was my hubby that was like, Jen, and I'm like, what's going on? And he had his closet was a corner, an outdoor corner closet. and he had his clothes hanging, but he had his guitar case, he had a couple guitars, guitar case, and then I had a couple years prior had gotten him a really big Valentine stuffed bear, and he had it in there, right? And you don't think about these things.
No.
And I'm like, what? He's like, you need to come here. And sure enough, his guitar case was covered in mold, that some of the clothes that were hanging in the back, the wall. And, Ashley, I'll be completely frank with you, we didn't take care of it properly. We knew to contain it. Like we knew, like when we took the garments out, we put them right to a plastic bag. There was a couple things we did wash. There was a couple things we threw out, but we were renting. And when we approached the landlord about it, it was like no big deal. And I thank goodness for Don, because he was way more on it than I was. He's like, no, this is like a really big deal, because there was black mold on the wood floor of the closet, and then there was like white fuzzy mold that was growing on on the materials.
Yeah.
And well, they wanted to go through insurance. Well, insurance isn't going to cover something like that, because they sent in an inspector, and the inspector literally just told us to bleach it. And it was us that took all of the drywall down, and we put drywall back up. But here's the kicker. The reason why it happened was because the roof was done. And when the roof was done and the guys left, they didn't connect the downspout elbow properly, and we didn't see that water was coming out of that elbow rather than following the spout down. So it was going right there where the roofing material flashing met the side of the house, and it was leaking in. So even though we cut out the drywall and replaced it, you and I both know that mold went deeper. Like it was actually in the structure, right? So it's one of those things. And I would say probably about 6 to 8 feet away from that was where our porch was. And on damp days, if we were coming into the house, John used to always say, I can smell mold. Like, and he has an amazing nose. Like he should be a mold sniffer. He really should, because his nose is like so bang on. But he would always say, and now it makes sense, right? Like it just, you look back and you recognize these things, and it really makes my heart sad, because like you said, there's no conversation about it. Like it's really normal for people to just, just wipe the mold, just clean the mold. Like it's just mold, right? And in a lot of cases, it is just mold. When that mold is outside and it's fungus growing on a tree, it's doing its thing and it doesn't want to bother you. But when it's on man-made materials or even natural materials and it's in your home, that's an issue.
Right. Yeah. And so, man, you think about like the gutters situation too. There's this extension that you can get that goes right where you're talking about, called kick out flashing. And it essentially, it directs the water from the roof, because, water is always going to come splashing down, and It directs the water right at that side area against the wall to go into the gutter. And it's Makes sense. Not really installed anywhere.
Yeah, it's a specialty product, right?
Yeah, it should be standard.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And these are all the little things. And that's why I love what you're doing for people, because you can note those things, right? Like during a build, you can guide them when it comes to like, not the best roof design, so to speak, because there are ways that you can build to make your house safer when it comes to water, especially.
Yeah. Buildingscience.com is a really great resource for finding details for how to prevent water damage. So anyone who wants to do a little research, that's such a great resource that I love. And there's just so many moving pieces, because even if you design it and you specify it right, it's really now up to the hands of the builder. Are they going to build it right? Are they going to do it right? And so it's tricky and it's very challenging.
And is that kind of like, do you step in with that process as far as like, are you like boots on the ground to make sure that stuff is followed? Like how involved do you get?
I can be, but usually I'm not, just
okay,
because of budgetary reasons.
Oh, for sure.
But yeah, I do get involved with like having conversations with the contractor and just chatting through things to sort of emphasize the importance of certain things. So, you know,
Do
again,
you, sorry,
uh,
do you see a lot of miss faulty marketing when it comes to materials for homes and products? Like, do you find that you have to find, like, you do spend a lot of time sourcing like truly healthy products for homes?
yeah, because, you know, a lot of materials consider themselves green, but that doesn't necessarily mean healthy. Like, for instance, for like concrete, they consider it a green product when they use fly ash. But fly ash can contain heavy metal and other toxins, so not necessarily healthy. I think that the green movement and the energy efficiency movement, although they're very important, um, they don't always mean healthy, and that makes even more confusion for people. But I really believe that if it's healthy for us, it's going to be healthy for the planet. And so I feel like we need to be looking out for number one first, and then, if we're doing that, it's going to be healthy for Mother Nature. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of products that I think claim, you'll see like the LEED certifications and things like that on it, but you really have to look at things because why is it getting that? Is it getting that certification because it's a recycled product? Well, what was it recycled made of? What was the life? What's the history of use of that product? So yes, to answer your question.
And I think that one, I mean, we could do a really deep dive on that conversation alone, because even as a consumer, and this is a little off topic, but even like with clothing, recycled clothing, like it sounds really healthy and good for the environment, but people don't realize the process that it goes through and how bad it is for the environment. And then also too, what is the material that's being recycled down? And now that's up against your skin, like you're wearing it. So it is a really big movement. And I think in a lot of ways, like the purpose is there, the intention is there, but how green is it?
Yeah.
Right.
I just think they're just missing the holistic view of it, that reminds me, I had a client so there's a company, they make couches and their website is non-toxic, clean, this and that. Well, I have a chemically sensitive client who ordered one of their couches and got it and was like, I'm dying. Like, this is not clean. There's nothing healthy about this. And when I looked into it a little bit more, it was recycled fabrics made out of like yeah, so it had like plastic bottled recycled fabric on it, and he was reacting to that. And so again, it doesn't necessarily make it clean. That doesn't necessarily make it healthy. Sure, it's green because we're getting rid of the plastic bottles, but quit using plastic bottles. Refuse to buy them. Step one.
Right. Totally. Like there's nothing like getting packaged water.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind. You're literally paying for the plastic, right? It's just such good points to cover though. Like there's so many aspects to it that you don't think about.
Yeah.
And what is your favorite type of flooring when it comes to just overall health?
So it really just depends on, where it's going. Personally, I love a solid wood floor. I think it feels good on your feet. I think that if, they make sealers that are, better, healthier sealers that you can use so you can get a little bit more of that durability. Like I mentioned earlier, you can get a little bit more of that hygroscopic characteristic of the flooring where it can take on a little bit of moisture and release a little bit out. I still probably wouldn't use it in a super wet area because again, we want to prevent if there is a leak, or there is, the chance that water is going to be sitting on the floor for a long period of time. So in that case, tile is really great, or, Even concrete floors can be really great for that. But you know, you have to look at everything holistically, because I wouldn't just say do concrete floors and do tile, because I'd like to see, well, where are we going to warm things up in the space, and how are we going to balance that? And can we do something to the ceiling? You know, maybe that we can have a little bit of balance, and especially with acoustics too, right? So another thing that we don't think about in terms of health is just the sounds that we hear, and
Yes.
like the reverberation, and those things can cause us, you know, pain, honestly, headaches,
Oh,
all
for
these
sure.
things. So you don't want to create a space that's just made out of concrete block and solid materials. You want to try to find a mix of materials that can sort of balance and sort of absorb some of that sound. So I guess there's a lot of different floorings that I like. It just depends on what everything else is happening in the space too. But if I were to choose my flooring, I'll probably do like a hardwood flooring at some point when I build my house.
And what are your thoughts of hardwood in the kitchen? Like, I know it's not a place that, like the bathroom, but I always feel like it's a little bit risky.
It is. I think it can be risky. If I were going to do hardwood in the kitchen, I would want to make sure I have auto shutoffs on appliances, auto shut off on my house. So it really just depends. I usually tend to steer people in the direction of tile for kitchens, just because it's safer and you're investing a lot of money. So,
Yep, makes sense for
mhm.
sure. Did you have
Yeah.
any other like tidbits that you'd like to pass along to people when it comes to like home health?
I think I like to always share with people that if this is new to you, or if this is overwhelming to you, to start in the bedroom, because the bedroom is the place where we spend the majority of our time. It's the place where our body is resting and repairing and healing every single night. And it is the most important room in the house. So start by, you know, removing electronics from the bedroom as much as you can, and slowly revamping your bedding to get, you know, a mattress free of foams and toxins and pillows that might be off gassing, because you're really really close to these things when you sleep. So I think if you can try to find things that are natural materials, that are going to be just healthier for you, then you're going to get the most bang for your buck if you put it into your bed. And then another small tidbit on the bed is making sure that you're properly venting underneath of your bed. You know,
Mm,
mattresses can get moldy too. And
absolutely.
we breathe at night, and I know it's in my bedroom, it's usually me and my partner, and my two dogs are on their beds on the floor. And all of that sweat, breath, all of that is creating a high relative humidity in my bedroom when we sleep. So you know, in the morning, I usually crack the window, try to, you know, bring some fresh air into the room, even if it's just for a moment, like if it's cold outside, just for a moment to kind of replenish the space after a night of, you know, all the things we're releasing into the room. And then all that is now going into your bed too. So if there's nowhere for that bed to dry, you know, our mothers always taught us to make our bed when we wake up in the morning, but I actually don't believe that we should do that, because
Love it.
we should turn our bed comforters down and allow the bed to air out and dry. Because what happens is we are hot, we wake up, and then we throw the covers over top of the bed, and now we're trapping in heat and we're trapping in moisture that we might have produced during the night. So it's just these little tiny things that, you know, you can do to help improve the health of your space.
You won my heart over with that. I was so glad that you touched on the bedroom, because it is such a, it's a huge area of our life. That's where we sleep, that's where we rest. But I
Yeah.
love that you touched on that you turn down your blankets, because people don't think of it. And I don't make my bed right away for that reason. And to be honest with you, I learned that about dust mites is
Yep.
basically where, and I learned that years ago before, I jumped into this whole mold journey myself. And it's so true. You don't think about it, but you're right. Like between like your skin shedding and your breathing and you're sweating and whatever else, you need to air out the bed. So really good tips.
Yeah, and it's so funny because like my mom would probably be disappointed if she heard me say that because she was very much like, make your bed. But like
Yes.
my mother's mother and my mother's mother's mother, like they were probably taking the sheets and like airing them out and going outside and you know, shaking out the pillows and stuff.
I agree.
We like don't we lost touch. We don't do that anymore. So it's sort of like going back to the roots and learning from our ancestors on what they did because it was actually a really great way of doing things.
Yeah, it's I think the last couple years have instilled that for some of us because we were so busy before where now we're starting to realize things that are important to be busy with, and it may seem so simple as shaking your sheets out, but you're right. Like I completely agree with you. That's what our ancestors were doing. They were hanging them outside, they were beating them with a broomstick, they were they were doing the things right.
Yeah.
And I think that that's another point of like these green homes. I mean, I'm not a building biologist by no means, but it just seems like since we started building tighter and not having that airflow, and people are more prone to turn on their air conditioning than they are to open up the window, I think that that is obviously another contributor to our unhealthy spaces, right? And, even beyond mold, like you said, even the dust factor, the amount of bacteria that gets caught up in that, like it's all those things are so important.
And I think that that's why there's so much confusion, right? I mean, even AC in general is a relatively new concept. And so time is only telling us that, these things are actually contributing to our poor health. I mean, we're sicker than ever. And some of the things that have changed are just all the chemicals that come into the food stream and the homes that we now live in that we made tighter and tighter and tighter, and we now never open the windows. It's speaks
It's
for
like,
itself.
yeah, the modern day conveniences
Yeah.
really is what it boils down to. And unfortunately, it's made our health not that great. So,
And technology, oh my gosh, this could be a whole nother conversation, but like the modern day convenience of the phone too, that's something I talk about a lot, is practicing safe cell phone hygiene. Just like we're so glued to our phones and being connected. And I think that before we can ever worry about anything else that's going on in terms of EMFs, like how can we take some time to just disconnect from our phone, put it on airplane mode, just not be available for a few hours and then check in like maybe, twice a day or something like that. So just little things that we can do to sort of connect back to nature and, you know,
yeah, it's vital. And I will say, it may sound weird to some people, but we upgraded our phones recently, and I mean, I'm able to shut off the 5G function.
it's good.
But I will say that this phone, if I hold it for too long, I can literally feel a vibration coming out of like where the charger spot is, where if I hold my other phone, I don't feel it. And I wonder whether it be 5G or they're just becoming more powerful, like there's more technology behind it. But I actually can't hold this phone the way that I could hold my own, which is actually a good thing,
Yeah.
right? Like it's forcing me to keep that space, but it makes you wonder.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was crazy. I remember my first practitioner telling me to avoid EMFs, and I looked at her like, "You mean my computer?" I
Yeah,
was so confused. And now I'm like, I can feel. And I don't know if it's just because now I know and I'm more aware or what, but I mean, I can. When my cell phone is on for too long near me, I get a buzzing in my ears, and I know instantly. It's I don't know. I think I just have become more sensitive over time, but or maybe the phones are getting stronger. I don't know.
I agree with that though. And it's smart. You need to take breaks. You need to take breaks from your computer, from your screens, from your phone. You just need to step away from it. And the best way, like you said, is to get outside.
Yeah,
Yeah, sure. Well, I so appreciate your time today. It was a great conversation. I can't wait to do this again.
I know. This is so
Yeah.
fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. You have a great day. Thanks for everything. And if people want to reach out to you, they can reach you at Awakening Spaces on Instagram. Where
Yeah.
else can they reach you?
You can check out my website, www.awakeningspaces.com, or you can shoot me an email at hello@awakeningspaces.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks,
Take care.
Jennifer. Talk to
Have
you
a great
later.
day.
You too.
Bye.